Hey everyone. Ever since I started my law firm, I've noticed that many of my clients are confused between the difference between a change of status and a visa. I want to make this video particularly for my E2 visa clients to better understand the difference between an E2 visa and an E2 change of status. These are two different things, and there are some very important differences between them. And what better way to explain some of these differences than to make this video? In a moment, I'm going to pull up my computer and I prepared a presentation and we'll go through some of these differences together. So again, I think this video is going to be extremely valuable to help clarify any confusion that you might have. So make sure to stick around till the end. Here we have it. E2 change of status versus E2 visa by me, Michael Ashoori. So let's get started. As a general overview, what is a change of status? A change of status application is when you're in the United States in some valid non-immigrant status. For example, you might be in the United States as a visitor on a B1 or on an F1 student status. And the change of status is when you file a petition with USCIS to change from whatever your current non-immigrant status is to another non-immigrant status. Now, what is a visa? A visa is a document that is affixed into your passport that allows you to seek entry into the United States based on the terms of that visa. So again, the change of status is when you're in some sort of a non-immigrant status and you're changing inside of the United States to another non-immigrant status, and the visa is an actual travel document that gets affixed into your passport. Now, what do you get? And what I mean by this is, what do you get as a result of doing an E2 change of status versus applying for an E2 visa? E2 change of status. When you change your status, you do not get a visa. This is very important. You get status. Status is basically, for lack of a better term, it's a piece of paper that allows you to remain in the United States for a period of time, which is usually specified on the approval notice that you get when your change of status application is approved. So status is basically a period of time that you're approved to be in the United States to conduct some sort of an activity that's associated with that status. So for example, with an E2, if you do an E2 change of status, upon approval, you will be in E2 status for a period of time, which means that you're able to do what somebody under E2 status can do, which is to direct and develop your E2 business. And the terms of that status, again, as I mentioned in this note above, is specified on the approval notice that you'll get when the change of status application is approved. We'll get into this a little bit later in this video, but change of status to E2 will generally give you 2 years of E2 status. And that period of approval is going to be specified on that approval notice. Another thing that I want to mention here is that when you get a change of status approved, you get an I-94. The I-94 is basically your record and your proof of how long you're able and authorized to stay in the United States. So that's kind of a long answer for what you get with an E2 change of status. Now let's go to the E2 visa. When you get an E2 visa, as I mentioned in the last slide, you actually get a document that's affixed into your passport, a visa. And the visa can be used to enter the United States pursuant to the terms of that visa. Again, we'll talk about this a little bit later in this video, but not all visas are the same. And not all E2 visas are the same. Depending on your country of citizenship, your E2 visa might be approved for a period of 5 years, or it could be even approved for a period of as low as 3 months. And the E2 visa may be approved for multiple entries, meaning that you can use that visa to enter and exit the United States multiple times, or it could be a single entry visa, meaning that you can only use that visa one time to enter the United States. What you get when it comes to an E2 visa is largely dependent on your country of citizenship. Again, we'll explore that a little bit further later in this presentation. So let's move on. So another important thing, Where do you file the application? Well, an E2 change of status application gets filed with USCIS. When you're doing an E2 change of status, the application goes to USCIS. When you do an E2 visa application, the visa application gets filed directly with the US consulate or embassy outside of the United States that you're going to be applying at. So usually this tends to be your home country. Let's say you are a citizen of Canada and you're interested in applying for your E2 visa. Generally, you will apply at the appropriate consulate in Canada. And for Canadians, currently it's Toronto. So that's where you apply, depending on whether you're doing a change of status or an E2 visa. Now, is there an interview? This also depends on whether you're doing a change of status or a visa application. If you're doing an E2 change of status, there's no interview. If you're applying for your E2 visa, you're generally required to attend an E2 visa interview at the US consulate or the US embassy of your home country. Now, another important point that people want to know about is the processing time. Well, processing times, I should mention, they're always changing. So, for example, as I mentioned, E2 change of status, this gets filed with USCIS. USCIS generally posts its average processing times. So you can Google search USCIS processing time, and you should be able to find a link to a USCIS webpage where you select the form number for your particular case, and it will tell you the average processing times. That's important to note. But right now, as of the time of recording this video, what I've seen is standard processing takes approximately 5 or more months. It could be shorter than that, it could be longer than that, but you definitely want to check what the average processing times are at the time that you're planning on applying. An important point that I want to mention, E2 change of status is eligible for premium processing. Premium processing is a service where you pay an additional fee to USCIS, and USCIS will process your application faster. And you'll get an initial response on your application within 15 days. That response can be an approval, or it can be a request for additional documentation. So if you get a request for additional evidence, also called an RFE, then that can extend it beyond the 15 days because, of course, you're going to have to get the additional documents that they're requesting of you, and then you have to submit them, and then USCIS will take additional time to review those documents and issue a decision on your case. Just important to note that change of status is eligible for premium processing. Now, what about the E2 visa? Well, the E2 visa, again, we just talked about this. You apply for the E2 visa directly with the consulate or embassy that you're going to be applying at. And the local conditions of that consulate or embassy will be a major factor in how long it takes to get the E2 visa. There might be a consulate that is processing visa applications very quickly for E2 visas. And then there could be another consulate or embassy that's taking much longer. So it's going to depend on the local conditions of the consulate or the embassy. I would say that for many of our E2 visa applications, it will take generally a few months to get the visa appointment. It could be less than that. It could be slightly more than that. But for the most part, for many of our clients, for the majority of our clients, I would say it takes a few months to get that visa appointment. During COVID, of course, it was much longer. Another thing that I want to mention is there is no premium processing available for E2 visa applications. But in some situations, you can request an expedited or an emergency visa appointment depending on your circumstances. It's basically like making a special request with the consulate or the embassy to get an earlier appointment. You might have some sort of a emergency. Maybe there's some sort of a circumstance that would warrant the consulate or the embassy to grant an emergency visa appointment to basically speed that process up for you. Now, this is a very important point that I want to mention, and it's regarding travel. E2 change of status. As I mentioned, with the change of status, you do not get a visa. You get status. Generally speaking, if you do a change of status to E2 and then you leave the United States, you would forfeit your E2 status. So I write here, if you wanted to re-enter the US, you'd have to enter using a visa. So you could apply for an E2 visa at the consulate or enter using another visa such as a visitor visa. So I want to clarify what I mean by this. Again, the E2 status is a paper. It's not a visa that gets put into your passport. So if you get that change of status and then you leave the United States, you do not have a visa through that whole process of getting the change of status that would enable you to re-enter the US. So again, once you leave the US and when you just had a change of status, you forfeit that status. If you want to re-enter the United States, maybe you have some sort of a visitor visa, maybe you have like a student visa or something like that, assuming that you intend to enter the United States again to do whatever it is with that visa that you have, then you could use that visa. But if you want to enter the United States and actually pursue your E2 business again, then you would likely have to apply for the E2 visa at the local consulate to be able to re-enter under E2 status. I hope this isn't too confusing, but once you get the E2 visa and you enter the United States using that E2 visa, now you're in E2 status. This immigration lingo, these immigration rules, it can get really confusing, but hopefully you're still following. Again, if you leave the United States and all you had was an E2 change of status, once you leave, you'll likely forfeit that status. And if you want to re-enter again to operate your E2 business, you will likely have to apply for an E2 visa at the consulate. Now, E2 visa. With an E2 visa, you can leave and re-enter the United States based on the terms of that visa. For example, I was alluding to this earlier in this video, not all E2 visas are the same. Citizens of Canada will generally get a 5-year visa that's eligible for multiple entry, meaning that that person could leave the United States and re-enter the United States while that E2 visa is valid. But that's not always the case. Citizens of Jordan get a 3-month single entry visa, meaning that their visa is valid for 3 months and they can only use it to enter the United States one time. And then when they enter the United States, they likely get 2 years of status. But regarding travel, as I mentioned, citizens of Canada get a 5-year multiple entry visa. So for 5 years, assuming the E2 requirements are met, the E2 visa beneficiary may leave and re-enter the US using their E2 visa. Upon entry to the US, they will typically get 2 years of E2 status. So what that means is, let's say you're somebody that has a 5-year E2 visa. You can enter the United States, and once you enter, you'll typically be granted 2 years of E2 status. Then, once that 2-year period is coming to an end, you can leave the United States and then re-enter and get another 2 years of status. So that's the whole travel component. This is one of many major differences between change of status versus visa. Travel, though, is a major one, because if you think you get change of status and you can just leave the US and come back, it's not necessarily the case. You will likely forfeit that status. And with the visa, depending on the terms of your visa, in many cases, you'll be able to leave and re-enter the US. So it's a very important distinction to be aware of. What can you do in the United States? E2 change of status, the principal E2 applicant can direct and develop the E2 business. Similarly, with an E2 visa, the principal E2 applicant can direct and develop the E2 business. What about spouses and children? Well, the spouse of an E2 visa holder and the spouse of somebody that does an E2 change of status, assuming the spouse also gets their E2, they have the authorization to work essentially in any lawful capacity in the United States. So the spouse of an E2 visa holder actually gets, in some ways, greater benefits than the principal applicant, because the spouse of an E2 visa holder that has their own E2 status gets work authorization to work for any employer. Children with an approved E2 change of status or an approved E2 visa that enter the United States can attend school in the United States, but they cannot work in the United States. Again, children do not get employment authorization under E2, but they do have authorization to go to school in the US. Again, if you're doing a change of status, that E2 status has to be approved for the child to have the ability to go to school. Again, that's a longer conversation to be had. It depends on what the original status was that's being changed, but it's important to be aware of that. Let's keep going. A lot of people want to know which option is appropriate for me. Well, this is not an easy question to answer. It's very situational. So you want to make sure to consult with an experienced immigration lawyer that's experienced with E2. We talked about the fact that the E2 change of status, in order to do it, you must be in some valid status in the United States. First of all, if you're outside of the United States and you're not really planning on coming to the United States anytime soon, so maybe the change of status is not the appropriate thing. But if you're already in the United States, then maybe you can consider the E2 change of status. So this may or may not apply to you. Again, it's very important to consult with an attorney, but E2 change of status may be appropriate if you're already in the United States and you don't foresee the need to leave the United States anytime soon, because as we mentioned, that whole issue with travel. And the E2 visa may be appropriate if you're outside of the United States, or if the thought of being in a position where leaving the United States would cause you to forfeit the status makes no sense for you. For example, if you know that you're going to have a need to leave the United States and come back regularly, then doing a change of status likely doesn't make a whole lot of sense for you. So again, I wrote here, if you will need to leave the United States, again, that's potentially an indicator that the E2 visa may be more appropriate for you. So there you have it. In this video, we went through a lot of information about what is an E2 change of status, what is it to get an E2 visa, what are some of the differences between these two paths, what are some of the similarities. I hope you got a ton of value from this video. It can be a confusing immigration topic to discuss. I hope it was helpful for you. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you got some value, please make sure to hit that thumbs up button, comment. If you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button. At our law firm, what we like to do is put out videos to help empower our audience. Knowledge is power. We want to help to empower you. So again, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you on the next video.